though we now know the details on how the CIA tortured prisoners, there remains one man in prison for the CIA's actions, and he wasn't even involved in the interrogation.
The man in jail was not put there because he committed these acts of torture, but rather because he disclosed them to the media. We're referring to John Kiriakou, who has been serving a 30-month sentence for leaking classified information. Today, in response to this summary report being released, his family used his Twitter account to release the following statement, quote, "The torture report has now being released, proving John exposed illegal and inhuman acts. Why isn't he being released immediately?" So given today's report, should torture leakers get amnesty, because it seems to imply that they were leaking something that was a violation of U.S. law?
Not only should torture leakers get amnesty, and I actually had the opportunity to talk to John Kiriakou before he went into prison. Yeah, when I was over at HuffPost. It's an extraordinary man, because a lot of the information that was released today, this guy was saying existed, but he got thrown in jail just for saying it. I saw your tweet today about how it made you think differently about Snowden and how we should potentially punish Snowden or not punish Snowden, and it made me think of the same thing. This is a guy who released information that's valuable to the American people and to our way of life here, and yet he can't even come back to the country because he can be thrown in jail probably for his whole life.
You hit the nail on the head. I think that whistleblowing is a really important part of journalism. And in order for journalists and in order for the American people to hold those in power accountable for their actions and accountable for their wrongdoing, we need this information, right?
There were people in the field questioning this from the CIA, and they were told by CIA management, it's not your job to question the legality of what we're asking you to do. It's your job to just do it. There are people getting emotionally and physically sick by what their government's asking them to do. And if they have no recourse, they have to whistleblow, because their loyalty is to our Constitution, not to their managers.
Hi there, I'm Jared Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
Trying to keep a positive sense of humor for a ridiculous subject.
Yeah, you know, but the U.S. are the moral leaders of the world.
Yeah, sure they are. That's why we have clips talking about
John Kiriakou, the only man who actually went to jail for torture, and he leaked the fact that the U.S. was torturing.
Which, of course, leads us to the question, who should go to jail?
Mr. Bush, Mr. Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, et al.
Yeah, maybe run this.
Let's bring in Ann Wright, retired U.S. Army colonel. Well, the long-delayed report has finally been released. How big are its revelations?
Well, we don't know for sure how big they are, because the majority of the report is still being kept from us, the American people, and from the world at large. But certainly the executive summary, the 500 pages, detail things that we as Americans are very ashamed of.
What type of international reaction do you believe we're going to get here?
I would suspect that many embassies will have protesters out in front of them, and I would think that right here in the United States that we will have some protests too. We've had them in the past in terms of trying to get accountability for our own government actions, actions that many of us feel have been criminal actions, that there needs to be accountability for it. And just because the Senate issues this, this report, that's one step in finding out a little more about it. But now the next step is accountability.
Who is going to be kept accountable
for their actions? Well, that's the good point. And how far up will it go? Will it go to the director of the CIA? Will it go to the vice president, the president? Will it go to the Department of Justice and attorneys who changed the law, really wrote a different law, and then got Congress to pass it in order to protect people who are already committing criminal acts?
Now, the full document remains classified. Do you think that the summary that's being published is actually enough?
Never. No, we need to know the entire 6,000 pages, and we're hoping that Senator Mark Udall, who is a senator who is leaving the Senate within a month, that maybe he will read the entire report on the floor of the U.S. Senate, similar to what Senator Mike Gravel did for the Pentagon Papers nearly 45 years ago.
Ann Wright, retired U.S. Army colonel, thank you for speaking to us this hour.
So, of course, there's a huge list of people who should be going to jail.
And I hope Mr. Udall does read the whole thing into the congressional record.
Yes, that would be a good idea. But good ideas are not something that the American military comes up with.
Or the Canadian one either.
Yeah, and they're actually saying, what? Well, we got a clip.
The Canadian government has gone on record saying it does not condone the use of torture and certainly does not engage in it. But for at least the past 2 years, Canada's intelligence service and the RCMP have been allowed to use and share information extracted through the use of torture. Now, it has recently been revealed that Communications Security Establishment Canada has the same privilege.
The federal policy is getting much criticism from human rights organizations who say, despite what Canada says, it is essentially condoning torture.
Canada's Public Safety Minister Vic Taves gave the go-ahead to the agencies. Just this week, Taves resigned. It's the same week Harper made changes to his cabinet. Taves was heavily criticized by human rights organizations because of the policies. He was also among those who received backlash for the recently revealed metadata spy program that tracks Canadians' electronic use. Some members of Parliament have pushed to know more about security intelligence-related matters, but have been largely unsuccessful.
All that does is deepen the concern that this is very clearly now deeply entrenched policy in Canada, that the government is prepared to allow security and policing agencies to make use of information that may have been obtained under torture. And that raises very serious international human rights concerns.
Critics have pointed out the use of torture has also resulted in misinformation by the tortured. The CSEC spokesperson had no comment.
So, morality, out the door.
Oh, there's no such thing in fascist Canada.
No, and when you're GOP North, or like we'd like to say Taliban North, headed up by Harper and his conservatives, you know what you're going to get.
But the NDP public safety critic did have a discussion on the House of Parliament with our Prime Minister. And of course, Mr. Harper didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Check this out.
Today, the United States Senate Intelligence Committee released a report showing that so-called enhanced interrogation techniques used on militants were ineffective and never once produced information which prevented a terrorist plot. Now, the conclusion is simple. Torture doesn't work. Yet here in Canada, this Conservative government has repudiated basic Canadian values by issuing directives to CSIS, the RCMP, and the CBSA that allow them to use and share information obtained through torture. Will the government rescind these directives immediately?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, very simply, this is a report of the United States Senate. It has nothing to do whatsoever with the government of Canada.
Anybody with an intellect can see what they're shoveling.
Yes, of course, and I think it could be called bovine excrements.
Yes, indeed. That's the word of the day, kids. Now, look, come on, seriously. When you take a look at the American news, which is just amazing on this subject, you get an awesome response.
At least Bloomberg had a decent critique of...
of the talking head syndrome?
And the awesome thing.
Yes, it's awesome. Check it out.
The United States of America is awesome. We are awesome, but we've had this discussion. We've closed the book on it and we've stopped doing it. And the reason they want to have this discussion is not to show how awesome we are. This administration wants to have this discussion to show us how we're not awesome.
In an open society, if the CIA or any other federal agency breaks the law, we the people should know it. That being said, Talking Points does believe the report is a partisan play that will solve nothing.
If you want to defend torture, by all means, go ahead. But please, I am begging you, spare me any sermons about the law ever again.
If nobody's going to prosecute these guys for torture, then at least pardon them. So America is on the record naming what they did as criminal.
Okay, sprinkled in amid the talking heads who are paid by the media were two other unpaid talking heads, former CIA Chief Michael Hayden and Liz Cheney, the daughter of the former vice president. Here's a sampling of their defense of what to many seems indefensible.
There's a bunch that's not accurate in the report.
They're just absolutely flat wrong.
It reads like a prosecutorial screed.
It was information out of this program that led us to al-Qaeda leaders.
Do you think there's any merit whatsoever in what the CIA defenders are saying?
They do dispute about whether there was
So when it comes down to amusing propaganda, Fox, those guys are the best.
MSNBC is not bad either.
Yeah, they're doing pretty good right up there with CNN, the other guys.
But the whole thing about pardoning them, you can't pardon people for war crimes.
No, you can't. And Bush just recently had to cancel a public speaking engagement because there is an arrest warrant internationally for George Bush's butt.
Of course, under Obama, the program has continued, and there's been a little, surveillance going on.
Little.
But torture and surveillance go hand in hand. And here's a clip from Mr. Fiore taking a look at that very thing.
Me now have job in Washington, D.C., closer to my bosses. Me even get to work with friends who do neat spying things. It all started with my torture, tickle fuzzy hugs back when George Bush was president. We make torture videos, which my CIA friends burn, so our secrets stay secret. Then Barack Obama president, but me still around. Nosy senators want to know how I do the neat things I do. My bosses not want to tell them, so they bury them in millions of pages of reading and hide other papers from them. But then, nosy Senate people find CIA report my bosses want to keep secret. Bosses get mad. So they spy on Senate, make report disappear with computer magic. But they get caught. So Senate lady who likes spying on other people, very, very mad when she gets spied on herself. Other friends mad too. Now spying is Nixon, Constitution crisis and stuff. Me confused. But Barack Obama wants to help. Make everything open and see-through. Except for 9,000 document things he won't turn over to nosy Senate people. My bosses and spying friends take care of me, and now I understand. Spying and torture go hand in hand. Secrets good for both of us.
They call him Knuckles. You should have beating the prisoners, but they sometimes die.
So as we continue to take a look at the ludicrous situation that governments require such tactics,
and of course, the idea that America is the moral leader of the world and the indispensable nation.
Yes, I know, which is ludicrous to begin with. We continue to be Radio Free Canada.
I continue to be Robert Nisbet.
And I continue to be Darren Howard.
Peace.
Yes, and make sure you like, subscribe, share, and do all those cool things to keep the conversation going that mainstream doesn't want going.
And have yourselves a happy holiday.
We have reports of widespread excessive use of force by the police. This gives rise to concern, of course. Some vulnerable groups, including ethnic groups, blacks, have been particularly targeted. For this reason, the committee feels that there's a need for investigation and prosecution of all cases of police brutality.
Who owns the internet?
The answer is no one.
The answer is everyone.
Which is why thousands of volunteers around the globe give their time and talent
to create an internet experience that's owned by everyone.
And doesn't own you.
Where your information isn't being bought and sold.
Where power is in your hands.
Not in a corporate database.
That's why 10 years ago, we created Firefox. Non-profit, non-corporate, non-compromised.
Choosing Firefox isn't just choosing a browser. It's a vote for personal freedom. It's how we keep our independence online, burning bright.